everybody, welcome to the Black Sheep Props channel. I'm Steve and I'm here to teach you the tips, tools, techniques, and materials for building your very own super cool EVA foam props. In this episode, EVA foam cutting basics, we're going to look at some of the most common basic cutting techniques that you're going to use in every prop that you make. And not only are we going to look at the techniques that are the most common, we're going to look at the two most common tools you're going to use in making almost all of your cuts. And now look, cutting can be intimidating if you're not used to it, but it's like anything you've seen us do. It's easy. Once you get started, once you do one or two, you'll start getting more confident, you'll get smoother, you'll feel better about it, and then heck, the next thing you know, you're gonna be a knife-wielding foam ninja. If you're already comfortable cutting, heck, watch anyway. You might pick up a tip or two, hopefully you do. And that's it. So if you're ready to hit it, let's take a look at the most common cutting techniques we use for making something. Okay, we're going to begin taking a look at the basics of cutting EVA foam, which means we're going to be looking at the X-Acto knife and we're going to be looking at the extending box cutter. You'll live by these two tools when it comes to cutting. So here we go. Okay, so as you've seen in all of our builds, we go through varying thicknesses of foam. We go through 2 millimeter up to 4 and 6 and even up into the thick 1/4 inch and 1/2 inch foams, all the way up to the 1 inch foam and even 2 inch foam. So we're going to take a look at using both the X-Acto knife and the box cutter. Okay, so when we're cutting foam, starting with our thinnest foam, you can cut straight cuts with either your X-Acto knife or your box cutter. Both knives work just fine on thin foam. Cutting with an X-Acto knife or using your metal edge and cutting with the box cutter, either way. Now, one thing you want to remember, even when you're doing just basic cuts, is you don't want your knife standing straight up in the air like this when you're cutting for long straight cuts, because then you're only using the tip of the blade. You want to use as much of the blade as you can when you're cutting. So when you're going to do a long cut, you're going to lay the knife down low. That way as much of the blade as possible goes through, so you're getting a lot more cutting surface, which is what you want. And the same thing with the box cutter. You don't want the box cutter standing up like this. You want it laying down low. That way as much of the blade goes through the foam as possible. That way it's cutting ahead of itself. The same thing is true when you go up to the thicker foam. Keep your knife down low so that you go right through. That way some of the blade is leading and it's cutting ahead of the rest of the blade, and it makes your cut a lot easier when you have the knife laid down low. Now, when you get to the super thick foam, you're going to definitely use your box cutter. And it's the same thing that we just talked about. You're going to leave them, you don't want to cut with the knife standing straight up. You're going to want to lay it down as low as possible. That way when you go through, all the blade is sliding all the way through, like that. No matter if it's the straight cut with an X-Acto knife or it's a straight cut with a box cutter, remember not to have your knife tipped up, to have your knife laying down. That way, as much of the blade as you can possibly have going through the foam will help ease your cut. Okay, now we're going to talk for a couple seconds about the metal edge. This is a must. You gotta have a metal edge for when you're cutting, but you gotta be careful with the metal edge, because if you're not paying attention, you can jump the tracks, and when you're flying too fast and you jump the tracks, guess what gets hit? So you gotta be careful using the knife. It's a great tool for cutting straight lines, but you have to be careful with it. And what I mean is this, is when you're cutting with either knife, with the X-Acto knife or with the box cutter, take your time. Don't fly by your hand, because if you jump the tracks, you're in trouble. Believe me, it's happened to me. I've gotten a rack of stitches before because I was going too fast. So you want to hold your edge down tight, and when you start your cut, you want to go nice and slow past your hand. And you always want to be paying attention to what you're doing, both with the X-Acto knife and with the box cutter. You want to go nice and slow past your hand, because you don't want to be flying by. And that's with whatever thickness you're using. And again, it's very important to keep the metal edge held down tight, because you don't want to be in the middle of cutting and then have it slide on you, because that's when an accident's going to happen as well. So steel edge is a must, but definitely be careful with it. And here's another thing we need to talk about too. When you have the opportunity to have your support hand in front of the blade, do so. Obviously, in a cut this short, you're going to be passing right by your fingers. But if you're doing really long cuts and you start way up here and you're cutting, when you get to a certain spot, what you can do is you can make sure that your support hand is in front of where your blade is. And I'll show you what I mean here. So when you start a long cut and you start up here by your hand, your support hand has to be near where the cut is. But as you get further towards the back, now as you can tell, the knife is behind the support hand. And that way you can just slowly go a little bit at a time and keep moving your support hand. That way your support hand is in front of the knife and you're not going to hit yourself. So when you can, keep the blade behind your support hand just to make sure you don't whack yourself. Okay, so now we're going to talk about making curved cuts. We just got done talking about making straight cuts using our metal edge. Now when you're going to do curved cuts, you can use either knife. It's whatever you're comfortable with. When you're using an X-Acto knife, it's no different than when we made the straight cut. Everything we talked about is the same. Take your time, don't whiz by your hand. But when it comes to making curves, you can easily cut a nice, smooth, swooping curve with an X-Acto knife, obviously. And you can also cut a big, smooth, swooping curve with a box cutter as well. It doesn't really matter. They both do the same thing. Cutting a curve is cutting a curve. But if you're going to start cutting tight curves and wavy cuts, you're definitely going to want to go with cuts like this. You're definitely going to want to go with your X-Acto knife. That way you have much more control when you're cutting a curve. It's a little bit harder when you're getting that wavy with a box cutter. So if you're going to do tight curves or wavy curves and the foam is thin enough, definitely go with your X-Acto knife. But there are times when you're going to be able to cut big swooping curves and you're going to want the box cutter. Obviously when you get into thicker foams or even smaller foams like the 1/4 inch and 1/2 inch, cutting swooping curves is definitely easier with a box cutter because of the length of the blade. You know, and it's the same thing we talked about, keeping the knife at a 90-degree angle so you have a straight cut. And when you come out of the other side, if you've kept your knife straight, you've got a nice smooth cut. We just looked at cutting curves that have straight edges, but there's going to be times where you're going to want a curve that's got a bevel. So as long as you're using some of the thinner foams, when you get ready to use an X-Acto knife and you want to cut a bevel cut, you tip your knife sideways. So that when your knife is tipped sideways and you go all the way through and you make your swooping cut and you come out of the other side, we now have a really nice bevel edge on here. That's a nice detail. We saw that on our last episode. Actually, we've seen it in every episode, cutting bevel cuts. And obviously, you can cut bevel cuts with a box cutter as well when you get to the thicker foams. And the same thing would be true. Instead of keeping your knife at a 90-degree angle, you're going to want to tip it. And when you tip it, and you go through and you make your swooping cut, and you come out of the other side, now look at that. You've got this beautiful, huge bevel cut right here. So you can do bevel cuts with an X-Acto blade simply by, instead of having the knife up at a 90-degree angle, you tip it on a slight 45-degree angle to get your bevel. And if you have the box cutter, it's the same thing. Instead of having your knife straight up for a 90-degree cut, you just tip it at a slight 45. That way, if you're doing thin foam, you can cut a bevel with an X-Acto knife. And if you're doing thicker foam, you can cut a bevel with the box cutter. And another quick tip about cutting bevels, when you are going to cut bevels around something and you have your line drawn and you use your metal edge, we're going to keep all of our tips in mind so far. We're going to be careful using the metal edge. We're going to make sure it's held down tight. We're not going to fly by our hand. We're going to take our time. And we're not going to use our box cutter on a straight up 90-degree angle because we don't want a 90-degree cut. We want a bevel. So we're gonna tip our knife slightly. We're gonna go slow, keep our metal edge pushed down very tightly with our support hand. And we're gonna slide right out of the back. And we're gonna spin around. We're gonna go to the next cut. We're gonna do the same thing. Keep our metal edge down tight. Keep the knife on a slight angle. Take your time. Slide right through. And we're just gonna go around to all four sides. Follow the same steps. Be very careful. Don't rush by your hand. And now we're gonna go to the final cut. And we're going to do the same thing, nice and slow with our knife tipped on a certain angle. And then look at this. Look at that. That is one beautiful bevel. And notice the edges are all at the exact same angle. It's that easy. Kind of looks like a little piece off of a Hershey bar, kind of. Anyway, bevel cuts, awesome. You can do a bevel cut with an X-Acto knife if your foam is not too thick. And you can do an awesome bevel cut with the box cutter too when you start getting into the thicker foams. Bevel cuts are very simple, but safety is the key. Don't rush, don't fly by your hand, because like we've been talking about, man, oh man, you do not want to jump the tracks, because pow, that is not going to be cool. Emergency room sucks compared to sitting at the prop table, let me tell you. Okay, now we're going to talk about the opposite of what we just talked about when using the most of our blade to do a long cut. There's instances where you want just the opposite, where you want the smallest tip of the blade cutting through your foam, and one of those examples is a circle. And what I'm talking about is this, is when you're standing up your knife and you have it standing straight up, you've got a super tiny point going through the foam. Standing the knife up gives you a tiny little pivot spot. We just used an example with the 2mm, but now if you go up to a slightly thicker millimeter, like so, we've got just the tip of our blade going through the foam, and that's about it. So here's a perfect example of standing the knife straight up and using just the point. You connect right up to the beginning, and check this out. Look at that. Man, that is radical. When you need to do a tight circle, you need to get most of that blade up out of the foam and just be using the very tip of the blade. That way you can pivot. Okay, now we're going to look at another instance where you want to use the tip of the X-Acto blade, and that's corners. If you're going to come in with your straight edge and you're going to cut past your line, and you come over to this side and you do the same thing, you cut past your line, and we're going to cut past our line like so. Now if you notice in these corners, look at what happened. You completely see the knife cuts on there. Look at how that opens up. That's not what you want to do. So what you would do in that instance is we would start on this side, but this is when we want to stand our knife up and really use our point. We're going to start right at our corner with a point, and we're going to slide right through our foam. Now, when we come around to this side and we go ready to do the next cut, we want to match up with our point right in the corner and slide right through to our next spot. And then we're going to do the same thing on this side. We're going to stand our knife up right in the corner and slide through. You cannot even see any crossover in the cuts. Look at the difference. This piece, where we went all the way through the corner, leaves a tear in the foam. You see the crisscrossing. When you use your knife and you stand it up and you use just the point, look at that corner. There's no crossover at all. It's nice and clean. Plus, don't forget, we've seen in our videos, when you bust out this bad boy and you start heating up foam after you've cut it, the creases are going to expand. So if you've cut all the way past your edges and got this kind of thing happening, when you hit it with the heat gun, that's just going to open up even further. So not only using the tip of your knife for being able to pivot and doing tight circles, but you're also going to want to use your X-Acto knife and just the tip of it by standing the blade up to get into corners. And that's the same with thick foam. A lot of people don't have a problem using their box cutter, and when they need to get into a pointed area like this on their foam, they have no problem sticking their box cutter in and moving it back and forth a little bit to get it to go all the way through and then finishing their cut. And the same thing on this side. Wiggling it down to hit the bottom and then going through with the straight cut. And you can do that. If you like that, that's fine. But for something like this, I still like to use the X-Acto knife because as you can tell, the X-Acto blade's plenty long enough to go through the foam. So as long as you have a sharp blade and you stand it up straight to get it down in there for the point, I like to use the X-Acto. And here I'm going to show you what I mean. Is you come in and you start at your intersection, you go straight through, and we've got one cut. Now we're going to do the same thing. We're going to come here to the intersection right there. We're going to stand our point straight up and go straight through and come straight out, and look at that. Look at that. That is sweet. Look at that point we got from doing that. Very nice. Perfect. And there was no crossover. We didn't go past it on either side. That is nice. So if you've got a super sharp blade and you stand it straight up and you poke straight through, then tip your knife down and start going, you're going to be able to make yourself some super tight corners like that. Which brings me to the next point. Blades. If you've noticed, everything we've done tonight has been with a super sharp blade, and that's the key too, because let me tell you something, foam really monks these things up, man. I can't believe that something so soft like this can wreak such havoc on a steel blade, but it does. These things dull fast by cutting foam. So we've talked about this in another episode. When it comes to X-Acto knives, you definitely want to invest in a box of 100 of the classic number 11 X-Acto blades, because you're going to go through them a lot, and that means you're going to be disposing of a lot of blades. So definitely go and buy yourself a medical container that's for sharp objects. So as you finish a blade, you take it out, you drop it in, it's in super hard plastic, nobody gets hurt. When you're done, you just cap it and you throw it away and no one gets injured. And when it comes to the box cutter, you don't want to be changing these blades out all the time because they cost money. And you've seen this on some of our other videos before. You can buy more blades for an X-Acto, but when it comes to a box cutter, invest in a sharpener. I think this is only like $20. This is made by Kershaw. There's plenty of other companies that make cutters. This is a diamond cutter. Very cool little thing. You can unscrew it if you're going to be traveling. You can close it up. Super cool. Open it. I leave it open all the time because I use it constantly every single day. And it's super easy. When your knife is getting dull, all you got to do is lay it on a little bit of an angle. Kind of do like a C shape. And then back towards you on an angle. A little bit of a C shape like that. And that's all you do. You run it back and forth a few times on an angle, both directions. And then, man, that baby is, woo, that thing is knife through butter stuff right there. That's crazy smooth. So definitely sharp blades is totally an issue. So when it comes to X-Acto blades, buy a lot of replacements and something safe to throw them in. And when it comes to a box cutter, definitely invest in a Kershaw sharpener or any of the different brands of sharpeners. I happen to like Kershaw's because I bought it and it works great, so I've stuck with it. Sharpen your stuff up, and you always want to keep a sharp blade so all your cuts are the way you want them. Okay, so we covered some of the most common cutting techniques for all of your foam prop building. And we also looked at the two knives you're going to be using for all your cuts, an X-Acto knife and a box cutter. Besides some of the most common cutting techniques, we did some that weren't so common, the pivoting with the knife point and some bevel cutting and a few other things. We also covered the importance of sharp blades. We covered some important safety tips. Don't forget the safety tips. We don't want an emergency room visit because, like we said, emergency room sucks compared to sitting at the prop table. So that concludes EVA foam cutting basics. Hope you liked it. If you did, give us a like, share us with a friend, and subscribe to this channel. And together we're going to go step by step through a lot of super cool builds so that you get the props you deserve. Hope you liked it. See you next time.